With Arsenal winning the Women's Champions League, Renee Slegers has become only the second female manager to win the competition since 2010. In this video, we remark upon Slegers' achievements and discuss why there aren't more female managers in women's football. We look at the barriers to entry for women and what the FA needs to do to encourage more female managers. This is why women's football needs more female managers. Right, let's get into it. Today we're going to be discussing female managers in the women's game, why there aren't enough, why we want to see more, and some of the barriers to entry for women in management. Obviously, the women's game, you'd expect it to be similar to the men's game, Harry, in that you'd expect there to be, the men's game, not a single female manager, it's all male managers. In the women's game, obviously, I think it's fine that we've got male managers, but we want to see that change, don't we?
Yeah, of course. You want to see, as we've seen with the players coming through, the role models and the inspiration we've seen from female players, we want to see that kind of transfer across to the touchline. We want to see those role models and more role models, because there are obviously, let's not discredit the ones that are already there, but we want to see that growth in female managers, that growth in female coaches, and not only see these the on the pitch players dominating, but we want to see representation for female managers in all the top divisions in the dugout.
Indeed. So I want to start by we're going to start by looking at some numbers. We're focusing on the WSL here because that's the league we cover the most. Obviously, it's an issue that's prevalent across international management and across a range of different leagues. But focusing on the WSL, at the start of this campaign, 66% of the managers in the league were male managers. Only 4 managers that were female. Sonia Bonpastor at Chelsea, Laura Kaminski at Crystal Palace, Amandine McCart at Leicester City, and Rayanne Skinner at West Ham United. Obviously, we saw Amber Whiteley come in at Liverpool. We saw Renee Slegers come in at Arsenal as well. So we've seen female managers coming in this season, but then we've also seen, that's still only half of the league at the end of this campaign. Obviously, Laura Kaminski did leave and was replaced by Leif Smurrad. So we've seen changes this season, but it's still not even half of the league are female managers.
Yeah, it's disappointing in a sense, because, as you say, we started with 4 and then we got up to 6 with Matt Beard and Ida Val going and Slegers and Whiteley coming in. We thought, okay, you've got to half the league there, and it's good to see this representation through the division, because that's the thing. You don't just want to put any person in there and go, oh, we've got a female manager now. You want to see top quality female managers. So it was good to see 6 there at in the biggest league in England, all managing and all very, very good managers in their own right. And then obviously Kaminski got sacked. We dropped back down to 5, and Leif Smurrad came in. Now again, this isn't disrespect to Leif Smurrad or any other of the male coaches in the league, but we want to, in this sport, we want to see the WSL with top female coaches. So I think that it's really good to see. We're at 5 now as we end the WSL season, and the fact that you've got the likes of Bonpastor and Slegers managing those top clubs as well is even bigger a factor, and that's even more positive. But it would be nice to see the league fill up with a few more female coaches.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about why representation is important then. I want to start by actually discussing power dynamics, and I think players are more comfortable being coached by female managers. Now, the power dynamics in women's football are really different to men's football. In men's football, because there are no female coaches, because there is such a low amount of gay players and gay managers, we don't really have any issues, because every relationship is coach and player, and all the players are player and player. What you have in the women's game is a range of dynamics in the dressing room. It's a very different situation where you've got a lot of couples, you've got players who could be in relationships with managers, stuff like that, because of there is a difference in the nature of those power dynamics. And obviously that becomes complicated in a dressing room, because the manager does have inherent power over players. And though I think it's a really difficult dynamic there to get right. And I think there's a preference, therefore, for female managers, because I think often they understand the players and their concerns more than a male manager could. Yeah. To an extent. Obviously, I think there's some great male managers out there, I think, who get it absolutely spot on. But it's difficult when you can't relate to some of the issues and stuff like that. So I do think in terms of those power dynamics, having a female coach for a lot of the players is more comfortable. I think when we saw it in Chelsea over the summer, a lot of the highest ranking players in the dressing room asked the ownership, asked the leadership team for a female manager.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense. They've just come out of they've just come out of Emma Hayes. They wanted someone who was similar to that, who was that arm around the shoulder type. I think Bon Pastor, initially, I thought she actually, towards the end of the season, I've changed my mind a little bit on this, but I thought that she was a little bit more cold than Hayes at the start of the season. But I guess that makes sense coming into a new environment. Not that she's a cold person, but when you go from Emma Hayes, who has her arm around everyone's shoulder, to Bon Pastor, it's going to be a bit of a difference. But then seeing her at the end of the season where she's sprinting around Wembley Stadium with a trophy, I think we've seen a very different side to her. So maybe that's just the Chelsea effect. She's loosened up a little bit. But I do think there is a preference there for some players to have a female manager. The other thing, role models are important, Harry. We're seeing, obviously, with the women's game growing, a lot of young girls then getting into football. I think it's therefore important to have managers the same.
Yeah, 100%. As you say, the growth in the women's game has come partly, the massive growth we've seen is because people see their stars out on the pitch and they go, I want to be like Alessia Russo, I want to grow up and be like Ella Toone. But if you do that, we want to see the same off the pitch as well. We want to see, and you get people who grow up, who sit there and go, I want to be like Emma Hayes, I want to be like Sonia Bombastor. And you feel like if you get more high quality female managers into the WSL, then you're going to see that grow on an exponential scale. But what it also will allow is that by inspiring more people and young girls to become coaches, it means in the future you will have more and more female coaches of a high standard that are ready to come in and replace their role models and replace their idols, just like the players did. The likes of Russo would have grown up watching Alex Scott and Kelly Smith, and they come in and they're the ones winning Champions Leagues like their idols do. That's what we want to see now, and we're seeing it with the players. We're seeing girls who want to grow up and be like their favourite stars on the pitch. But if that can translate off the pitch as well, I think that's a vitally important part of the game. You can't have a football match without managers, and I think it's really important that people are inspired and people want to be on the touchline, want to be in the dugout, and want to be like Emma Hayes and whoever else we see now on the touchline.
I think the FA are falling into the same trap, and they're doing this loads across a variety of aspects of the women's game, of just doing whatever the men's game does.
Yeah.
And it's weird because you've got a game of men's football which is over 130 years old, and you can learn from that. You can learn from the mistakes they've made. And one of the biggest problems I think in men's football is that there is this entrenched idea that to be a manager you have to be an ex-player. And I just don't think that's true. No. And I think the women's game has an opportunity to inspire people that there is this opportunity. You could come across and actually be a manager in the women's game. I think for young girls who, if you're not an incredible footballer, because some people it just doesn't naturally come to, you can still be involved in women's football. You can still be this variety of roles. I don't think there's enough focus given to that. And actually, I think there's a good opportunity for the FA and for the various football associations to promote management as an idea, as a goal, as an aspiration, rather than just pushing it onto players when they come towards the end of their career. But don't get me wrong, I think obviously having ex-players coming across as managers makes a lot of sense, for the same reason that Renee Slegers has been hugely successful this season. She's come in as someone who understands the game, who's played the game to a very high level, and I think she has gained the respect of the Arsenal players quicker because of that. But I think it's an opportunity if the FA invested in grassroots coaching, in stuff like that. I think you can push those coaches through the pathway that way, rather than pushing the elite players, who a lot of them don't want to go into coaching at the moment. And that is another issue we'll talk about in a moment. But I think there's an opportunity to broaden it and bring in more coaches from other places. And at the moment, the way they're filling the gaps is male coaches, because there are so many male coaches. And if you can't break into the Premier League because there's only 20 clubs, and you can't break into the Championship or League One, League Two, you might step across into the women's game. And we've seen people like Gareth Taylor, who was a fantastic footballer in his day, move across and then coach in the women's game. Yeah. We've seen like Nick Cushing. We've seen it with Mark Skinner as well. A lot of coaches coming across and doing it in the women's game instead, because there isn't really the option for players who weren't at the elite level in playing in the men's game to become coaches. I think the women's game needs to avoid having that same trap. So hopefully we'll see that happen. Let's talk about then why there aren't more female coaches, because it's easy enough to say, oh, let's just get some more, but where are they? How are we going to find them? So first, I think there's a lack of interest from female players. Listening to an interview with Spencer Owen the other day, he's the owner of #UnitedWomen. They're a National League side. And he was talking about the FA initiative. So at the moment, the English FA are pushing out to female players the coaching courses.
Mm.
So if you don't know, in England, to be able to coach a certain levels, you have to have certain coaching qualifications. You start off with your FA level 1, and then you get to UEFA C, UEFA B, UEFA A, and UEFA Pro. Now, if you're managing in the WSL, you'll have a UEFA Pro license. So that's the sort of level you want to get to, or depending on who you're managing and what situation is, you'll be between A and a Pro. But so now they're trying to push that to managers lower down in the pyramid, to players, sorry. But the problem is, and not enough of these players are interested in it. So Spencer was saying on this interview, not a single #United player took up this opportunity. The FA are offering these courses for free. These are courses that cost quite a bit of money, a few £1,000s a course, depending on what stage you're at. And they weren't interested in that pathway. They weren't interested in that opportunity. And I think that's a huge problem at the moment, is driving that interest into players.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a problem that you see up and down the pyramid, starting right at grassroots, where it does. I think it comes from a sense of, it feels like the players, especially the people who are playing now, and it's something we want to change for the younger players who are, who've just come into playing, is that the one route to get into women's football, the one route to get into football as a woman, is to be a player. Like that feels like the only route. You even see it now at grassroots level. There are quite a few female coaches who coach local sides and grassroots teams, but again, they're still predominantly coached by male coaches, and I think that it's, to the players now who are coming through, it's important to get that message of that there are more routes into women's football. You don't have to be a player to get into the football landscape. You can come through and be a coach. And I think the players that are already playing and that they're trying to persuade to become coaches, there needs to be a benefactor. You've got to create something that's going to try and keep them involved in the game, because right now, especially, you mentioned like the National League there and the Championship, for a player, for the majority of clubs, it's a difficult place to be, which is why if you've had a in terms of, they love playing football, but it's not a full-time job, and there's money restraints all over the place. Is that why they become a coach? Because they're going to still have the same problems they have as a player, where they've still got to work another job, and they've still got the money still tight, and the clubs aren't going to give them what they want. So it's good that these courses are being funded for free, but you've got to find a way to persuade. You've got to find a way to make it encouraging. You've got to give people a reason to become a coach, because at the moment, if the problems that they have as a player can translate at the moment in the lower leagues to when they become a coach, those problems aren't just going to vanish, because it's the same scenario. The difference is you're just on the touchline and you're not on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned they're the same professional players. So in the third tier, a lot of players have part-time jobs as well. So if you the football's a part-time job. So if you're working a full-time job, you're playing football on the weekend, you're training in the evenings as well, and then on top of that, you've got to study for this course to become a coach. It adds something that it's really difficult to fit into your schedule, especially if you've got any other sort of life commitments beyond that. If you've got kids, if you've got a partner, if you've got literally anything happening in your life, it's impossible then to manage. I think that's the problem. And also, there's not enough security that you will get a job in coaching. Because of obviously the lack of opportunities, the lack of places, and the fact that there are men in those positions at the moment. But I think it's got to be promoted, the idea of having female managers. And people will say, but the men's managers are doing brilliantly. Well, actually, look at the proven track record of success. The most dominant side in the WSL over the last decade are Chelsea, who've had only female managers in that period. The most dominant side in international football history were the USA, who were managed by a woman. They were then usurped by England, by the Netherlands, who were managed by a woman, who then went on to manage England, who won the Euros. So we've seen a proven track record there. The most recent winner of the Women's Champions League is a female manager. And I think there is a proven record there that female coaches can succeed in the women's game. I think that will start to be pushed more and more. And as this generation of players retires, that will necessarily happen. That eventually that will come in as everything else grows. I think it will hopefully happen. But I think there needs to be more of a push, more of an encouragement. And to be fair to the FA, they are starting to do stuff. So starting at the end of last season, actually they'll now be qualifying. The FA actually put a load of professional players on their UEFA A licenses. A load of WSL players, a load of ex-WSL players. You saw people like Karen Barnsley, Steph Horton, Kim Little, Zakira Musovic, Sophie Howard. There's a load of professional players. Beth Mead, I think, was one on there as well, who all took their UEFA A license course. So that takes about a year to complete. So they should now be getting around to completing that. So there are going to be players like that. And I think, just to end this video, fun little thing, because when I saw Kim Little on there, I thought, brilliant. Perfect manager. I could see Kim Little as a manager. Which players do you think will make great managers?
Oh, I like that question. I think the obvious one is Wendy Renard.
That's top of my list as well.
Absolutely incredible. I think that, if she was a coach, you just wouldn't.
I can picture it already in a suit that's got Leon trimming, obviously the Leon badge embroidered onto it, just looking suave on the touchline, and then barking orders at her players.
Yeah.
Would she be a barking orders type manager?
No, I think she'd be cool, calm, and collected.
Bit more Sonia Bon Pastor.
Yeah,
headphone in.
I think if you were looking at I think Katie McCabe's that wind-up assistant manager would be brilliant.
Yeah, or pundit Roy Keane.
Or a pundit. That would be really
just good. Telling everyone to get on with it.
Yeah, but I do think, because I think McCabe would, if you have a cool, calm, collected manager, McCabe would be the type of person to be that, just winding everyone up, being annoying, always in the fourth official's ear, taking the mick out of the opposition bench. But I do think it's big. I think, obviously, you mentioned the likes of Beth Mead and that picking up their getting their licenses, and I think that also leans into the role model aspect, because if you've got all these people that idolise Beth Mead, if they see her now taking her badges and potentially becoming a coach in the near future, then that's gonna if you're inspired by Beth Mead as a player, you're going to be inspired by Beth Mead as a coach. And again, I think that is all linking, and that is a positive step from the FA. So credit to them because they're doing something. Yeah. And that is good. It is a problem that I think has solutions. There is a way to get more female managers into the game. There is a way to get female coaches at the elite level and managing the top side and winning all the divisions like they currently are. And they're doing very, very well at that at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other problem is as well, you've got to make it attractive as a proposal. Yes. Because if you're an ex-player, and we're seeing it a lot now, would you rather spend loads of money and time becoming a coach and then having to do this whole other career once you finish playing? Yeah. Or would you rather just start a podcast?
Yeah.
Where you can just chat about the game? Because half of the players are doing it now. Because you can just talk about the women's game. You put very little investment into it and you'll get a lot out of it because you've got that reputation. You've already got that following. They've got to make it an attractive proposal. So there needs to be more of an investment, more of an incentive, I think, from the FA to do that. But I think it is something that will happen naturally. I think players will want to become coaches once they've retired. I think that will be the natural sort of progression. But I think another way you can try and solve the problem is to invest in coaches who aren't ex-players.
Yeah.
So, and I know obviously they are offering discounts for female coaches who want to take these courses. So they do get money off the courses. I think that's a really positive step from the FA. Yeah. They're doing the same with disabled coaches and players and coaches from disadvantaged backgrounds as well. So I think that is all really positive. And actually, I know the FA get a lot of slack, get a lot of criticism, but to cut them some slack, I think that is one area where they are actually trying to create some change.
Exactly, because you mentioned it there. I think that female coaches are important, but even the likes of when Sean Goater came in as an interim manager or a caretaker manager for Aston Villa, that's really important to have representation of minority backgrounds on the touchline.
Well, Hope Powell is the best example, former England manager, obviously. So, I think pushing out role models like herself is a really important part.
We want to see a more diverse touchline. It would be very, very inspiring to see, and I think that they are doing. To be fair, again, as you say, it's the FA. Give them credit. They are doing well to start. I'm sure they're watching. They are. They are starting to build a hope, and hopefully it will create a more diverse touchline at the very top of the game.
And again, that's somewhere they can learn from the men's game, where there are very few. There's been like one or two black managers in the Premier League ever.
Yeah,
which is insanity, or at least in recent history, I think. So, I think the women's game can definitely learn from some of those shortcomings. Another player, just to get back to the more silly side of it, who I thought, a bit of a rogue shot actually as a coach, I said Melanie Leopolds.
I like that.
I know she's got a kid, so it may complicate things.
Join her.
But not assistant.
Yeah,
I could see it again, more of that reserved manager type, but I think should be fun on the sideline. I think should be a good manager.
I do think it does need potentially the women's game is a female manager who does bark those orders, who's a bit more of
Who could that? Erin
aggressive.
Cuthbert.
Erin Cuthbert, the manager. I would hate to be the fourth official for that football match if she ever became a manager, because that would just be a horrendous 90 minutes.
Yeah. It's less of those type of players that go into management.
Yeah, that is true.
It tends to be the more level-headed, tactically minded players who then have this sort of who love the tactical side of the game and then go into management. Yui Hasegawa, for me, would be an obvious one again.
It's the intelligent players. When you look at a player who could become a coach, you got to think who's an intelligent player, who reads the game well, who is 3 steps ahead of the play, and I mean that's what usually makes them a phenomenal player, but it will also make them a phenomenal coach. So I think they're definitely options, and hopefully
Marta.
Yeah,
I feel like she just walks in the room and everyone just goes quiet because it's Marta. She'd have that respect instantly.
That's it. She'd just go manage Brazil and just keep them going. She'll just never leave Brazil.
Tuck herself on. Yeah. She's planning to play at the next one.
Player manager Marta.
Well, she's planning on playing in 2027. She'll be 41, 42.
She could player manage, and then they're drawing or losing in the World Cup final. She subs herself on with
Theo run down the tunnel, get her kit on quickly. Yeah. That would be an amusing sight. But yeah, I think that rounds up today's discussion, ending on a fun note at the end there. Do let us know which female players you think would make, what current players would make fantastic coaches. And yeah, let us know what you think of this discussion. If you have enjoyed, make sure to comment, make sure to leave a like as well to show you've enjoyed the video. And of course, if you're new, hit that subscribe button as it helps the YouTube push this channel out to more people. That is everything today. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.